Hey everyone, this is Madonna Guy. You're here with the Natural Alternative, and I'd like to welcome James Roguski again today. How are you, James?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so what's biggest on your mind at the moment?
Well, time sensitive stuff like the United Nations and their Pact for the Future, it's going to take probably a couple of minutes to explain their crazy way of doing things, but um, I, I realize that the time differential gets people mixed up. So they have a deadline of 1 p.m. New York time, because the United Nations is in New York on Tuesday the 3rd. And so, however that translates to wherever you may be, what is going on is later in the month, on September 22nd and 23rd, they are having, in the middle of their General Assembly, which runs from the 10th to about the 30th, they're having a 2 day summit for the future. Summit of the future. I always get it mixed up, one or the other. And there are at least three documents that they've been negotiating for well over a year. And they have a an interesting procedure that they go through, and they refer to it as the silence procedure. Now, what that means is that the negotiators have been, hammering out these documents for well over a year. And on two of the three documents, they've gotten themselves to a point where they think that they've reached an agreement. And so they give a 72-hour or so long period where the negotiators say, okay, we've come to a consensus agreement. All of the negotiators agree on the text, but they have to send it back to their government for final approval. So there's a 72-hour period. It could be longer, and in this case, it appears to be a little bit longer, where it's kind of like when you go to a wedding and the clergyman says, anyone who opposes this matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. If no one says anything and the silence holds, then it's assumed that everybody's fine with whatever is in the document. If a nation sends a official letter to the UN and they say, no, we got an objection about this, that, or the other thing, then it kind of calls off the whole deal, and they got to go back to the negotiating table and try to hammer out an agreement that everybody can agree to, because they really prefer to have the theatrical production during their summit of everybody's cool, nobody's going to get up and argue and debate, and then they have to have a vote, and maybe some nations don't like it or whatever. And so they've already done that with one of the documents. There's a 5-page um, declaration on future generations that a week or so ago, they thought they had an agreement, and they put it through the silence procedure. And some unknown, acknowledged nation. They didn't tell us if it was one nation or a number of nations, but somebody did speak up and said, nope, we're not happy with it. There were a lot of issues that were mentioned, but they didn't say which country or countries had issues with, it's just a 5-page document. And so I reported on that, a couple of weeks ago. And so, that may go through another silence procedure. They may try again if they can reach an agreement. But the big one, the Pact for the Future, there's, like 80 different topics in it. And that was put into this silence procedure a couple of days ago. And the deadline for nations to speak up about it is, as I said, New York time, Tuesday, September 3rd at 1 p.m. And I'm concerned because it seems like the vast majority of the world is just not paying attention.
Yeah.
And the largest section in the document is about transforming global governance. So, if there was ever something that the whole world should pay attention to, it's the United Nations essentially saying, and I'm going to overstate this a little bit, hey, put the UN in charge of the world and outer space, right? Give us more power, give us more money, Let us be in charge of everything. And, we're really worried about climate change. So, that's a big piece of it. Um, I had a little slip of paper here, but it's off on the other side of the room. Um, the word development and sustainability are, in the document well over 100 times. Climate change is in there, I think, 35 times. Uh, they, tell the world what they want, and they know that most of the world is distracted by whatever people are paying attention to.
Yes.
And they quietly work in the back rooms to reach these agreements. And they tell the world for more than a year now that the summit of the future, they're going to be getting together on September 22nd and 23rd, and they're going to declare that they've all reached this agreement. But did anybody ask you? Did you have any input into the process?
No.
Do you even know who your United Nations representative is, or the negotiators who were speaking on behalf of your nation to sign you on to this agreement? Um, it's a game, and people need to know how the rules work. Yes, on one level, it's all BS. It's all a bunch of words. And there's a lot of people who say, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to, do what they say." But, this is your government agreeing to do all of these many things. And then, you turn around one day and you wonder why your local municipality or your school board or, some other government agency is doing something crazy. It's because you weren't paying attention when they told you that that's
Yeah.
what they were planning on doing.
Because I know here in Australia in 2020, we passed something in about December 2020 that said that the next time there's a pandemic, that the UN peace forces are allowed to come in and help with, you know, all sorts of whatever we need during that next pandemic. So we've already passed whatever that was.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everyone said that'll never happen. People are still saying that'll never happen. I'm like, you're not
Well,
paying attention.
and anytime somebody says that'll never happen, with all that has happened, it's obviously not true. I've learned that the only thing I can control are my own actions, and even that's, difficult. But raising awareness of what it all is that they're, looking to do, it has everything to do with money. They want control of finances. They are way behind on their achieving the sustainable development goals or Agenda 2030,
Yeah.
all kind of commingled together.
Yes.
And, you know, tying a lot of this in with climate change just points, to the ridiculous nature of what it is they're really trying to do. A lot of the language sounds wonderful until you put on your, you know, um, evil villain, viewfinder, and you go, okay, well, here's what the words in the document are. If I have a good heart and I look at it, oh, it sounds great. We want to end poverty and, you know, help people with health and finances and all that sort of thing. But then when you look at it sideways and you go, if I wanted to implement these things and take advantage of them and I was really evil, could I? and
Yeah.
and so the 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 way like the biblical parables are told, you tell it to a certain audience and they hear one thing, you tell it to another audience and they hear a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of this is the bureaucrats at the United Nations trying to ensure that they get to continue to create bureaucracy around the world, keep their high paying jobs, and put their mark on what they think the world should be doing without asking the people of the world, hey, what is it that you really need and what is it that you really want? It's a power play
Yeah.
that if the nations agree, it's kind of like a gentleman's agreement in a certain sense. It's not like arguably this is not necessarily a treaty. A lot of the words are very fuzzy, but it gives local government officials cover to say, oh, well, we have to do it because our um, foreign minister agreed to this declaration. And so, as a nation, we said we were going to do this, that, and the other. And then crazy policies start to get implemented, and you're left going, how the heck did we get here?
Yeah.
Um, it's because over, now I don't know if this is the case in Australia, but in the US, this is our Labor Day holiday weekend. So everybody's having a picnic or a parade or, just kicking back and relaxing. Um, this is not when government is paying attention or the people are paying attention. They're distracted by everything else under the sun. So, I encourage people to, at the very least, read the document and understand that this is how they play the game. They tell
Yeah.
you what they're doing, and then they do it, and then everybody goes, "Hey, what happened?" Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they're just, trying to take over the world. No, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. New World Order. No one's mentioned that for a while. The silence procedure, is this something that happens a lot?
Um, well, you'd have to define a lot. They instituted this. I believe they've done it in the past, but they certainly instituted it during COVID,
Right.
where they couldn't have public meetings and all that sort of stuff. Now, I mean, on one level, yes, it makes sense, right? You've got negotiators who are working on a document. Just because the negotiators reached an agreement doesn't mean the government officials back home are, in agreement with it. But what really should happen is the silence procedure should last, 5 months, and there should be public debate and people should weigh in on
Right.
it. In a democracy, not that any of us live in a democracy, the people would vote on it, yes or no, up or down. Um, but that's not how they do it. That's too messy,
Yeah.
and they don't get to get their way if they actually made it. They talk about transparency, they talk about openness, but it really, really isn't. This is how they slam it through. But then they get to say in their weird little religious cult that they all seem to, participate in, oh, well, we told you, and you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And, if you think about at a wedding when someone says, if you've got any reason to believe that this shouldn't happen, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah, there's been a couple of movies and such, The Graduate, where they,
Yep.
speak up. But for the most part, they know that it's very, very easy for government officials and most people to procrastinate and just acquiesce and have a defeatist attitude of, well, yeah, whatever, I can't stop it anyway, so go ahead. But it's your silence on an ongoing basis where you don't speak up and you don't, write an email or a letter or make a stink, um, that you give them the opportunity to say, well, you didn't object.
Yeah.
And this is the crazy way that they play the game. Is it ideal? No. Is it wrong? On a certain level, yes, it is. But it also is reality. This is how they operate. And so, um, we shall see. There's a third document that is about, a global digital compact. Small things like artificial intelligence and central bank digital currency and a global ID and, your privacy and all those sort of things. Um, the rumor is that that document has been negotiated, but they have not made it public that they've started the um, silence procedure for it yet.
Right.
So the first one that they did, the Declaration for Future Generations, some nation stood up and said, no, we don't like it. So please don't tell me it's not possible, right?
Right.
Last year, even though they really played a good head game on the world, um, at the beginning of September last year, they had four documents that they wanted, or I should say, four declarations that they wanted to adopt during the General Assembly. And they started in September early, and they said the deadline was the 17th of September, just in advance of the meetings that were supposed to be the 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd of September. They had 4 documents. And on Sunday, the 17th, 11 nations rejected it. So at the last minute, 11 nations came through and said, nope, we don't agree to this. And so technically, officially, um, those declarations were not agreed upon. So please don't tell me it can't happen, because it happened. And, but again, if people are not paying attention, if they're not pushing back, if they're not speaking up, spread the word on social media that, this is coming, and we'll see what we can do to push back on it.
Yeah.
And so
they get a copy of it on your Substack?
yeah, global governance is the article where all that is. And like I said, the first one failed, so they may be trying again. The global governance one, I'm sorry, the global governance is the one that's current right now. And the global digital compact with digital ID and privacy and all that stuff, I suspect will be coming soon. Stay tuned. We shall see. So yeah, the documents are all there, and I encourage people to read them just so you know what the UN is up to.
Yeah. And what can people do? They just need to share it. They need to get the word out. They need to
share it, understand what's going on. Ideally, there's a list in the article of who your United Nations representative, UN ambassador, or whatever title they may be given. That would be the person to give a piece of your mind. The deadline for this particular silence procedure is Tuesday at 1 p.m. New York time, but up until the 22nd and the 23rd of September, let your UN ambassador know that you've got them in your sights and you're not going to just, walk away silent. Send them an email, tweet at them, however you can get their attention. But, for the most part, let your fellow citizens know that this is coming in about a little more than 2 weeks' time. Or I should say 3 weeks' time, approximately. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Future Generations one did manage to get stopped, the 5-page one.
Yeah, some nation or nations objected to it. So they're, most likely trying to negotiate some consensus agreement about it. It was a relatively innocuous document. I personally really objected to the idea that there should be migration just as a matter of course, built into the fabric of society, that, we need to be prepared for there essentially to be no borders. And so, the word migrant means something. It's not the same as immigration, right? And so all of these words really matter. And so, they basically are agreeing that, oh yeah, people are going to be moving around however the hell they want. No, I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And, there's many, many other aspects in the documents. So, I encourage people to get as informed as you wish, and reach out to your United Nations representative and let them know that, you're not happy about it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, James. That's awesome. Good update.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.